just all seems so unfair. You know, everything has seemed so unfair for Arya from the moment that she fled, you know, in King's Landing and witnessed her father killed and then Yoren killed. It's just every time she sees someone who seems admirable, they get killed.
She's not a little kid anymore, and she's had all of that stripped away from her. And this is just another nail in the coffin of her childhood, really. And I think that as dark a place as she is in going into that trial, she leaves it in a darker place.
Arya, don't!
Let me go!
I think she believes it's just really, you know, the strong survive, and if you're not capable of killing your enemies, they're going to kill you, and that's all there is to it. And so the concept that there is some higher notion of justice, that's this abstract thing out there that people should adhere to, is she just hasn't seen any evidence that that's a real force in the world. And in fact, the opposite seems to be true, where injustice prevails, and people who believe in justice, like her father, are dupes and are going to be betrayed and slaughtered.
Looks like the god likes me more than your butcher's boy.
Burn in hell!
I urged him to surrender peacefully. But the king didn't listen to me. Burn them all, he said. Burn them in their homes, burn them in their beds. I slit his throat to make sure that didn't happen.
I think the great reveal of that scene is that Jaime was actually heroic in that moment and actually was saving lives. And because of his pride, he's never really tried to defend himself. He's endured his legacy being slandered, and that's poisoned him in some ways. And I think it's, you know, it's caused him to become a very cynical figure. And what's shocking is that what comes out is redemptive. I mean, he was acting nobly in that instance and has been condemned for it ever since.
Jaime's always been a fascinating character because he's somebody who starts out in such an awful, seemingly unredeemable place. And by the time you get to this point in the story, you're really starting to see him as a person who's presented with a lot of advantages and also presented with some completely impossible choices that he was forced to make, and that have turned him into that seemingly unredeemable person who you thought you knew at the beginning of the story. And to me, that's one of the things that George does in the books so well that's most interesting, problematizing the idea of good guys and bad guys and refusing to let you rest on your laurels and the assumption that, well, this person threw a kid out a window, so obviously there's not a good bone in his body. And there actually is.
I can't force them to meet us in the field. And I can't attack them where they're strongest, but I can attack them where they're not. And Casterly Rock can't run away. I'm going to take their home away from them.
Robb is starting to realize that if he's going to regain the momentum and have any chance in this war, he needs a dramatic victory. And the most dramatic thing he can think of is take the seat of Tywin's power. Casterly Rock is not defended by a great force, and no one's really expecting him to go there, and it's kind of an audacious plan. But if he can pull it off, he can prove that Tywin is vulnerable and not all-powerful, and really regain some much-needed momentum in this war.
Just as the destruction of Winterfell has a tremendous symbolic weight for the Stark family, so the capture of Casterly Rock would have a huge symbolic weight for the Lannisters.
There is only one person in this kingdom with that kind of army who hasn't already sided with the Lannisters. The man whose daughter I was supposed to marry. Walder Frey.
Well, I think what Karstark says to him is probably true, you know, in that marrying Talisa was a huge mistake strategically. You know, I mean, for Robb, I think it had nothing to do with strategy. He fell in love with this woman and he wanted her as his wife, and he doesn't regret that at all. But strategically, it meant that he lost the alliance with the Freys, and I think that created a kind of whispering and dissent in the ranks where there hadn't been any before. They saw that their king broke his vows, and everyone knew about this promise, and then he broke that promise. So I think that was probably the decision that has had the most adverse consequences for Robb as king and as general of this army.